What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Thanks for checking out Shinsen88 Gaming. Got an interesting one for you today. This is Hole for the PC. Hole was developed by Negafish, and released in November of 2024, so fairly recently. This is actually a solo developer from Japan, which I think is pretty cool. This, as far as I'm aware, is his or her first game, which is pretty impressive, I think, as we'll get into. Before we get too far in, worth noting this review will contain some very minor spoilers just in terms of the included content, because I think that's important for explaining what's actually here and why this game is worthwhile. Whole will run you $5 American, but has previously dropped to $4 on sale, which is, I believe, a bargain. It's probably going to take the average player somewhere between 5 to 10 hours to see everything the game has to offer, so that's a pretty great value in terms of time, but what about the gameplay? So at its most basic, Hole is an extraction shooter. Think something like Escape from Tarkov, Hunt Showdown, or similar games. You start in a sort of hub area, and when you're ready, you drop into a map with the goal of gathering resources and killing other players before extracting with what you've found. If you die, you lose everything, or at least you get only a small fraction of what you gathered. Now, I said other players, however, the twist here is that the game is actually single player. The other players are all NPCs that are designed to mimic or represent real players in an online game. Enemies spawn in their own squads that will engage both you and the other squads throughout the map. This means that as you run around gathering resources, you'll hear lots of gunfire and dialogue, which is really just gibberish noises that are kind of meant to add to the atmosphere by serving as a stand-in for a proximity chat. It's worth noting that the squads will continue spawning throughout the run, so you'll never run out of enemies hunting you down. In addition to this, there's a threat level, for lack of a better term, that increases over time. And as it increases, you'll start to encounter more deadly enemies, including ones with body armor, ones with more powerful weapons, and that sort of thing. Whether you die or extract, you return to the hub, wherein you can accept and turn in quests, buy permanent upgrades, customize your weapons, etc. Speaking of weapons, a game like this would be nothing without fun gameplay, and I think this is really where Hole shines. Clearly, this developer not only loves firearms, but is somewhat knowledgeable about them. The basic controls are similar to what you might expect. You've got aim down sight, you've got a reload button, fire select, that sort of thing. However, you also have to manually cock each gun with a middle mouse button to put a round in the chamber. You can then top off the magazine to get your 10+1 like you would with a real firearm. If you fire all your bullets, you're going to need to manually chamber that round after inserting a new mag, but if you reload with the round still in the chamber, you can skip that step. It's pretty easy to forget this in the heat of the moment and be left pulling the trigger and getting nothing but a dull click over and over. This means that you need a bit more concentration than in similar games where you might just have to hit R and not worry about it. As someone who's kind of a gun guy, I find this pretty cool. It actually reminds me of a game called Receiver, which I played a long time ago on the channel. That game was more of a proof of concept and required you to press like 50 different buttons to reload your gun. So it's cool to see sort of a light version of this mechanic put into an actual full game. Outside of this pretty neat mechanic, the actual shooting itself feels really good. Aiming's responsive, the weapons have good kick and impact, the sounds are great, and you're going to get a lot of good feedback like clouds of smoke and the barrel turning red as the gun heats up. Enemies are also going to react when you shoot them, whether they die or you just kind of stun them. All in all, feels pretty good. So speaking of the weapons, what weapons are there? Well, you start the game with what is essentially just a basic Glock-style pistol with a 10-round magazine and a flashlight. After a few runs, you'll get into solving some different tasks, finding some secrets, and you'll get access to some additional weapons, including an AR-style rifle, a shotgun, and a sniper rifle. This may not sound like a lot of variety, but each of the weapons is highly customizable with various attachments that will drop from some of the more powerful enemies. These can include things like larger magazines, different types of sights, compensators, suppressors, and even different ammo types. Each of these different attachments or customization options will come with both benefits and weaknesses, meaning that you're going to have to choose somewhat carefully. For example, if you choose hollow points, you're going to deal high damage to unarmored targets, but you're going to do very little to armored opponents, or at least the armored areas on your opponents. If you choose larger magazines, you're going to have more capacity, obviously, but you're going to have an increased reload time because they're not quite as wieldy. If you choose a suppressor, you're going to dampen your sound, but you're going to increase the potential your gun will jam. It's worth noting that most of the higher level enemies are going to be wearing body armor, so unless you're really, really accurate, armor-piercing rounds are generally the best option I found. However, for almost all the other attachments, it's purely personal preference. Each attachment, by the way, also affects the way the gun looks, both in-game and in the menu, so you're going to see that actual visual representation, which, again, is pretty cool. Speaking of visual representation, I guess we should talk about the overall presentation and graphics of the game. Whole has a pretty neat lo-fi sort of aesthetic that sits somewhere between like the liminal space aesthetic, Jurassic Park Trespasser, and the first season of Bakemonogatari, I guess is the best way I could describe it. The maps are very maze-like and generally claustrophobic, meaning even when you've learned them, you may still get lost. And you're going to be doing a lot of running around looking for the extraction points and loot and that sort of things. The enemies are kind of these faceless humanoids that come in different color-coded faction variations. The firearms are probably the most detailed part of the game, and as I mentioned, are quite well done. Although there doesn't seem to be any sort of like lore or world building as far as I can tell. The actual world, as it were, is cohesive, and I think it just looks interesting. There are also some creepier sort of supernatural elements that you'll come across as you play, but I don't want to spoil those here. All in all, I think it's pretty great. So are there any negatives to Whole? Yeah, there are a couple, but nothing that I would consider to be game-breaking. Unfortunately, the biggest flaw is probably going to be that their performance can chug in some of the more wide-open areas. This is likely because this is this dev's first game, so it's probably excusable for that reason, and the fact that it doesn't really break the game. However, I've seen some people have some issues with it that they were able to fix through some config file edits. I didn't have too much of a problem with it, but I have a fairly powerful PC, and it's worth noting that my CPU temperature actually rose higher in this game than in Monster Hunter Wilds, I think. So definitely worth noting. In addition to that, there, on paper at least, isn't that much content. I mean, you've got 4 guns and 3 main maps. However, as I mentioned earlier, I think, this game is going to take the average player probably somewhere between 5 to 10 hours. So there's a decent amount of stuff to do, collect, and discover. So really, with that $5 price tag, it's kind of hard to complain. I mean, I wouldn't expect 20 different maps in a $5 game. And additionally, I kind of think that this is a positive in that the game doesn't outstay its welcome. I think if you were forced to play this for 20 to 30 hours to get everything, it might start to get a little bit stale. As it stands, I think that I've pretty much completed the game 100%, and it took me about 8 hours total, including recording the footage for this video. You could definitely do it faster, but that kind of depends on how courageous you are with your runs. Overall, I'd say there's not really that much to complain about, and even with the flaws that it does have, I'd say Whole is well worth it. So what else is there to say? All in all, I really enjoyed my time with Whole. In fact, you might say this Whole was made for me. Or you might not say that. That'd be kind of weird. I wouldn't say that. I did say it, but I wouldn't. Anyways, there's a lot of value here for the price. And even ignoring the price completely, I think there's enough here to keep you engaged and interested, provided you enjoy this type of game. The gunplay is great, customization is great, the game has an interesting sort of aesthetic and theme, and overall it is just a good time. I would say highly recommended. Definitely looking forward to whatever this developer cooks up next, and it sounds like there's already a new game in progress as we speak, so I'll definitely be checking that one out when it comes out. That's about all I have to say about this one. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if the game looks interesting to you, go check it out. Until next time, thanks for watching, take care, and God bless.